All right, Shalom. First off, all praises, admiration, honor, and glory goes to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakahakodash, and double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. All right. First off, I want to say Shalom to the ones that push this word out in truth and in sincerity, which are the apostles and elders on down to the brothers. And Shalom to the ones that endured his faith to the very end, until the time of Jacob's troubles, which are again the apostles and elders on down to the brothers and a few sisters. All right. So Shalom. So I want to do this, little lesson, pretty much just looking into. I saw a whole bunch of videos going on. Mostly. Here's the thing: when it comes to comedians or somebody out there, which they do be telling the truth, yes, but where are they getting it from? Cat Williams, right, talking about how these rappers are being cloned and all these people are getting cloned. Is pretty noticeable. Now this has kind of been like a background subject because even we talk about this, right? But we don't really talk about it that much, right? Because at the end of the day, it's really not that important, man. Prophecy is what's important, but stuff like this still fits into prophecy, right? But you got a whole bunch of people noticing these, top influencers. They disappear for a while, right? They'll disappear, and every time they come back, they're different in some type of way, right? They're noticing that they're most likely being cloned in some type of way. So, just real quick, I'm gonna look. I already looked this up, right? Now, at first, I looked up if humans. Well, no, if cloning exists. Google will automatically say there's no valid proof or there's no verified proof of cloning ever existing, right? They'll try to hurry up and sweep it under the rug. So I asked it in a different way. When was the concept or idea of cloning people first thought of? Right? So pretty much just the thought of it or the idea. It says the concept of cloning people gained traction in the 1960s and 70s, right? But one thing they will hardly tell you is that it goes back even earlier than that, right? Even earlier than 1932, right? It also says that they actually did start, cloning or splitting atoms and embryos in 1885. Now, why does this man need to clone and split embryos? Right? Just been researching into this a little bit, right? Why does this man need to start splitting embryos? Ever since the year 1885. So, this is Genesis 1 and 26. And I'm going to go further on this. It says, and Yahweh said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Right? What is that talking about? Right? We are made in, you know, the image of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, right? The angels, right? We're made in the image of the angels, right? So it said, let us make man in our image. That's why we follow the footsteps, right? The best of our ability, right? To love the Lord with all our heart, right? Which is fear, faith, right? Living by the example, right? That's why every time when we open up camp, we start with a prayer, right? And it says, "Give us the spirit of Yahweh Shai," right? So we're not gonna, the image of God is not a clone, right? We're not going to be made in the image of a clone, man. A clone is not alive. That's why that's not natural. That also goes into the book of First Thessalonians, or probably even second, right? When it talks about the son of perdition, right? Because then he plays what? This man plays God. In fact, I might as well get that real quick. Okay, I was right. It was Second Thessalonians. This is Second Thessalonians 2 and 3. It says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." Right? When you go to the son of perdition, that means the son of destruction, which are the ones that run the society at the moment. Right? It says, "Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of Yahweh, shewing himself that he is Yahweh." Right? This man will do anything in his power, starting from running this society. First off, Job 9 verse 24, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked, right? But they think they actually run this. They're trying to play God. They're trying to play, and be as Yahweh. When they started that whole cloning process, that was them making an act of God, right? Why do you think when they was testing the nuclear, weapons, the Manhattan Project? I did a video on that last year, right? Oppenheimer quoted from the Buddhist book. He said, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Right? Pretty much saying that he is God. So stuff like this, these are things that we've been saying for years, right? And it's been right in front of people's faces, but it takes a comedian, to bring it out. Now people want to start listening, right? When they got it from us. Crazy. So that's why I was looking into this. In fact, a little bit this week. This is it's like a website, pretty much the history of cloning and when they first started this stuff. Um, Starting with again the year 1885, pretty much the first demonstration of artificial embryo twinning, right? I believe this was for a sea urchin. I'm not going to read through all of it, but you pretty much get the whole gist. 1902 of a salamander. 1928, right? Yet another one. 1952, right? So again, this all goes back to the 1800s. So if this is a constant, repeat of experiments that they've been doing since the 1800s, what makes you think that this doesn't exist on a normal today, right? Especially with this high advanced technology that they got. So 1958, 1975, 1984, damn, they cloned the sheep. And what are they doing? Most likely cloning the sheep, the sheeple. 1987, 1996, same year as well. 1997, also same year. 1998 and 99, 2001, 2007, 2013 of a human. So, and what did this scripture just say? Right? Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of Yahweh, shewing himself that he is Yahweh. That's why we daily prayers and curses upon this place, right? Prayers for our salvation and curses upon the downfall of this place, man. Because if this man is not taken out of power, no flesh will be saved. And as I just read in what was it, the book of Genesis, right? The scripture said, make man in, Yahweh's image, right? Or the angel's image, not of something that is dead and artificial. That's why this man, you see why he, gives us the technology, right? Makes you more of a slave, more convenient. So they're all putting everybody in a hive mind, and that's pretty much the whole trap. That's always been for decades. But what was new to me to even realize that, yeah, this started in the 1800s, right? That's why we do these lessons in these videos, man, because the more that we do it, the more that we start learning more things. So this is Matthew 16, and I'll start at 24. It says, then Yahweh Shai, Salakia, then said Yahweh Shai unto his disciples, if any man come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. Right? Them sellouts definitely have not lost their life for the Lord. Right? And they sure as hell didn't gain it because the money's not theirs. Right? They're all just clones and puppets. Right? Verse 25, it says, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. Right. Verse 26, it says, for what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? That whole scripture is a prime example of your top entertainers, right? All these sellout jakes, they're all getting bent over and plastered, right? As the elder says, right? On that casting couch. And these are the things that the Lord said was going to happen, right? These are all part of prophecies. You're going to have a lot of anti Yahweh Shais, and those people are anti Yahweh Shais, man, anti Messiahs. That is the power of the Lord, right? The Lord is above all that. So, by the Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakah HaKodash, and Shalom.